For The Real News, I'm Dharna Noor in New York City, and I'm at the United Nations headquarters where the Climate Action Summit is taking place. Civic and business leaders from all over the world have come here to discuss how they're going to be taking the climate crisis more seriously. And a big emergent theme at this summit and the events leading up to it has been the role of youth movements in really pushing the climate conversation forward. Earlier this weekend, the UN held their first ever Youth Climate Summit, and away from the spotlight in Brooklyn, Climate Justice Alliance held a Youth Climate Summit of their own. Before that, on Friday, youth leaders all over the world convened strikes. 4 million people took to the streets for what was said to be the largest youth-led demonstration in history. And this morning here at the UN summit, 16-year-old Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg delivered a riveting, damning speech in front of civic officials. She called on them to treat the climate crisis with the urgency that it deserves. That's also the topic of the complaint that she and 15 other youth from 12 countries will be filing to the UN officially. And away from the media spotlight, other youth have also been taking a stand. Earlier today, I spoke with a 14-year-old Indigenous environmental activist who's here from Indonesia about the need for reforestation and to really give Indigenous communities a seat at the table when deciding climate policy. Here's our interview.
In our area, in my community specifically, we for hundreds of years have been rejecting those palm oil companies from entering our land, but the villages surrounding ours didn't. They accepted the palm oil companies, and because of that, right now they're facing the problems that are related to that. They are having their forests taken before them, and their livelihood, their source of life, replaced by palm oil. And because of that, they have been facing many problems related to their food, their economy, and even clean source of water. In our culture, the people, the forest really depends on the culture. If we don't have our forests, we do not have our culture. It is intrinsically linked. And if we don't have our culture, we don't have the forest. We need the culture to protect the forest, and we need the forest as our culture.
You said today that allowing Indigenous people to protect lands is one good way to not only protect Indigenous people themselves, but also to fight climate change. That was a sentiment that was also closely modeled in the United Nations IPCC report recently on land use. Talk a little bit about why. Why are Indigenous people stewards of the land? And talk about what that history is, what having Indigenous stewardship and sovereignty could mean in fighting the climate crisis.
The Indigenous people are the best protector of the land because for thousands of years, they have lived in those lands. They have learned from the land, from the forest, how to manage it correctly, how to use it sustainably, which is the most important bit. And from there, we need to learn from there because those knowledge have been accumulated across hundreds and thousands of years in comparison to what we have now with the modern lifestyle, which is just not sustainable in the area, in the forests.
So in Indonesia, have Indigenous people been given a seat at the table in terms of this kind of decision making? I understand that last year the Indonesian president did pass a moratorium on reforestation, continuing from these palm oil companies. Has that had an effect? Was that enough? Have Indigenous people really been represented in these sorts of processes?
No. Even just a couple weeks ago when we were talking to the minister of Indonesia to the US, he just blatantly said Indonesia does not have Indigenous people. And that was just heartbreaking to hear that you don't even recognize the existence of the Indigenous people. Indigenous people have recently been getting more and more of a place to voice, a platform to voice their opinions, what they have to say, but it definitely needs to be improved.
Thanks a lot for watching. Appreciate it. But do us one more solemn favor. Hit the subscribe button below. You know you want to. Stay up on the videos.